That was dope. That was dope. All right, family, here we are again. Once again with another friend. We got Mr. Jimmy in the LAB, the lab. He's here to talk to us about the power of policy in higher education. And he works for the De-Education Trust. It's a policy and advocacy organization. I thought it was a think tank. So y'all gonna learn. I'm gonna learn. We all gonna learn. All right. So how you doing, Jimmy? What's going on, man?
I'm doing great, man. I mean, as great as one can be without the pandemic, but luckily I have health and a job, so things are pretty good, bro. Thanks for having me
Word.
on.
Hey, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. And it's good to see you again, man. So let me just introduce how I know you real quickly. So y'all know I live in Cali most times. I have roommates most times because it's expensive in Cali. One of my roommates happens to be Jimmy's girlfriend. Uh, Jimmy's tall. She's not so tall, but she packs a punch, right? You don't want to mess with Sam. So,
Nah, you
um,
don't.
yeah, and just got to talking to Jimmy when he would visit, and he's into some interesting things, both professionally and personally. We're going to talk about that education advocacy coming up. So, how would you briefly describe what you do?
I'm still trying to figure it out, man, to be honest. Policy can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But if I can synthesize it, like it's collaborating with folks, whether that's my coworkers, partners, or experts to advance equitable policies around affordability, like at the federal level, at the state level, at the institutional level. That's probably like when you boil it down to like the meat of it, that's pretty much what I do.
Okay, okay. And so, like, how is this done? Is it a myriad of things, saying some frontline action, some research action, like how is the sausage made, so to speak?
It honestly does depend by organization or like depends on the topic. At least in my experience, and again, I just came up like on a year in November. Oftentimes, like the organization already has like policy priorities that they want to pursue. You know what I'm saying?
Got you.
So then they usually get some type of funding to either do research. So we do research and are very data backed and data oriented. But we also provide a racial lens to it. So we provide like a racial justice lens to everything we do. So we
Okay.
don't just look at things for the numbers. We look at things for like who is it disproportionately impacting. And unfortunately, because of the way the system's set up, it disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities. So we do the research advocacy side, and sometimes it's just policies that are already there and continuing, and we kind of do an analysis of like, okay, well, who's it actually serving, and
Hmm.
how where are the gaps, and how can we make it more equitable? So an example is like free college policies. Free college means different things to different people, and it varies across states. So we did like a framework of being like, all right, if you mean free college, like for who, for what, where, and how long, right? And we kind of took that framework and analyzed a bunch of like free college policies across the nation and kind of like provided a score of like, okay, this policy does really well, and this policy, doesn't always provide the financial aid to the students who need it the most financially. So that's kind of in like two parters of how we do the policy. Like there's original research, and there's also just like policy analysis and how to improve it.
No, man, I like the way you explain that. I'm kind of able to see it, like in my own. While you were speaking, I was seeing kind of like a ranking, right? Um, and within that ranking, you guys were identifying like who was effective, if I'm hearing you right, and who could use some improvement, which is like beneficial because you can have something set up, whether it's directly on the campus or um, whether it's something with dual enrollment, but it doesn't mean the program is actually meeting what's set up, right? So no, that's really interesting, man. That's really interesting. So So with that, man, did you we're gonna rewind a little bit. Did you see yourself in this space during undergrad, in this advocacy space, or what did you see if we was to rewind the clock a little bit?
Oh man, hell no. I did not see myself in policy whatsoever. So I went to the University of California, Davis for my undergraduate degrees. Um, Definitely wanted to work with and alongside students, particularly first generation, low income, students of color, students who look like me, students who come from similar backgrounds as myself, and just trying to provide holistic advising. Like that was what I wanted to do in undergrad. Because I recognized that, like, you go to, at least for me, I went to college, but unfortunately classes weren't the hardest part of college. They were hard, but it was everything else, just adjusting holistically to the campus, to the space, to the people, to the rigor. Like, sometimes my students, it wasn't that they didn't understand calculus. It was that they didn't know where they're going to have their next meal, and that impacts you. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to be able to work alongside students to really just remind them of their brilliance and like them be able to cater their resources to what they wanted. Then I became a fellow where I was like a college advisor after I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the brilliance of students, man. They were persisting against just these financial aid policies and admissions that just didn't make any sense. I was like, yo, I'm telling you everything I wish I would have known. And yet there's still something, it was almost like an invisible hand was at play. These students were doing everything they were being told, students who look like me, and yet they still weren't getting it done. And that wasn't because of them, but I started realizing then I didn't have the words for it, but it was systemic.
Gotcha.
Right? Went to grad school, still wanted to work with students. At this point, I wanted to work with men of color in particular, because I realized, oftentimes in my managerial economics courses, I was one of the few men of color in the classes of 150. You know what I'm saying? So it was like this invisibility of folks like myself trying to talk about toxic masculinity, try to talk about like family, try to talk about all these different things that intersect as a student when you identify as a man. And then unemployment hit, to be honest with you. It was tough. It was tough to find a job after I graduated from grad school. And I expanded my search. I expanded into policy. I took one policy class in my grad program. And I talked smack the entire time. I was like, this makes no sense. Where's the community voice? Like, where do the community members come in and have these conversations? It just seemed really disconnected. It seemed systemically, it was designed to be disconnected from the people who suffer the most, unfortunately. That's what I kept like pushing. So my professor, actually, she was like, yo, you should look into policy because you have great questions and you have work on the ground. There's a lot of people who in policy who don't have work on the ground. They just go from school to theory and directly into making policy decisions at the abstract and not at the personal. So I was like, okay, didn't pay any attention to it. Fast forward, unemployment, applied. I didn't even apply to this position. It was an informational interview that literally turned into a real interview.
Wow.
It was a calculated risk, man. I had no policy background at all. But because of the people working at trust, like Dr. Tiffany Jones, Dr. Wilder Pilad, Dr. Kayla C. Elliott, Dr. Marshall, Victoria, Satra Lawrence, like I was going to join a team that was all Black and brown, highly credentialed, all about racial justice and equity. They're down to, disrupt the status quo. I was like, yo, I don't know nothing about policy, but this is dope. So I kind of made that transition. And now I'm in that space, which is wild, but not to a long way to answer your question is no, not in 100 years that I imagine being in policy at all.
Yo, you gave me so much meat to pull on there. Like, yo, that was dope. So I like the long note. And so I'm gonna back you up one more time. Because me not originally being from Cali, the outside view of Cali is what LA and San Francisco, the city, right? So can you take a little time, because you mentioned not the schoolwork, but everything else. So can you mention, give a shout out to, or however, like describe the part of California that you grew up in?
Most definitely. So For the folks who have never been to California, not everyone's a surfer. Not everyone does yoga. You know what I'm saying? Like not everyone lives in San Francisco and Los Angeles. It's a big state. So from the tip of California all the way down to San Diego, it's probably like 16, 17-hour drive nonstop. You know what I'm saying? It's long. So I live as far north as you can get in California on the coast before you hit a state called Oregon. For those folks who've never heard of Oregon before. But now, man, it's this tiny town called Smith River, California. It's less than 1,000 people. You know, it's really sandwiched between the Pacific Ocean and the Redwood Forest. And it's, yeah, man, it's where my parents ended up when they immigrated from Mexico. And I actually have a lot of family there. There's a lot of agricultural work. There's a lot of lumber mill work and fishing. A lot of like outdoor things, nature resources. Because really, man, Mother Nature there is like nothing that I've ever experienced anywhere. And I've been blessed enough to travel, and the Mother Nature up there is second to none. Anyways, yeah, man, Smith River is super small, which is a blessing and a curse. You know, I've met some dope people. I have friends that I've known since I was 3 years old. Shout out to my compa Christian. He's been my best friend since I was 3. You know, there's a bunch of people like that who I grew up with since kindergarten, first, second, third grade. We've been homies, and we're still homies to this day, right? But the curse of it is that it's so small that, first of all, everybody knows everybody's business, and secondly, it's like it's so rural that it doesn't have access to a lot of resources. So for some folks, rural is like you're 30 minutes away from a big city. Nah, I'm talking about like the nearest Costco is 2 hours away, rural. Like one hospital within like an hour radius type of rural. You know what I'm saying? Like we only have Walmart. Like we don't have computing. Like it's a different type of experience, man. It's a different type of rural than what people are used to. And with that, you know, it messes with students, you know, it messes with people, because I always had this saying, and I say it in jest, but it's true. Like there's nothing to do other than people and drugs, to be real with you. You know, we're near Humboldt. We're near Humboldt. So like, you know, cannabis is right there, but also the underbelly is like meth, you know, crack, a lot of that stuff. You know, that there isn't a lot of money. So there isn't a lot of year-round sports for people to do. So really the students, you know, you can get caught up pretty quickly and just have different pathways of life. So I say all of that because it's unfortunate, and that's where I'm from. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I have a really amazing, crazy, loyal family and community that has supported me throughout the entire way. And I always try to shout out Smitty whenever I get on anything, you know, I put it on my slides, you know, I shout them out, because it really is like, it's rare to find people who are from such a small town and you are able to have platforms to talk about it. Because there's other people who look like me who are also in small towns who are like, you get caught up in the same poverty cycle, you know, and it's great if you want to stay there. Like that's nothing against that, man. You do you, power and agency to yourself. But there's a difference between when you make a decision to stay than when the system makes a decision for you to stay. Now, I feel like oftentimes people don't get that. So all that to say, man, shout out to people in Smith River, California. That's where I'm from.
Man, I love it. I love it. I love it, man. So now you all, family, y'all got the backdrop. We bringing it back to Davis. You heard of some of the work he did. So we have a similar program in New Jersey. It's called Equal Opportunity Fund, EOF, first generation students, bringing them in. But you did some work like that at Davis, right? Could you highlight that a little bit?
Yeah. And I think as a context to this, like, you know, I'm very privileged where I came in as a Gates Scholar and a Dell Scholar. So I had like finances to give me a full ride, right? But I quickly realized just because I'm able to afford an institution doesn't mean I know how to thrive in one. So it was just kind of like I'm at this space and I didn't know what was what, man. I didn't know what I didn't know. Like I didn't know what office hours were. Like I didn't know what resources were available. Like oftentimes I was the only person who looked like me. You know what I'm saying? So there was just so much things that on top of like I'm the oldest of 4, right? I'm you know, have this responsibility to my family. I'm working and now I'm not working. So that salary is gone. Keep in mind, this is in like the 2009 recession. right? Because I went to Davis in 2011, so different financial situation. So things like imposter syndrome, things like like homesickness, things like culture shock, all of that controlled my first couple of years at Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And being 7 hours away, keep in mind, California is a big state. So UC Davis was the closest University of California school to me, and it was still 7 hours away from my familia. Right. So there's this constant tension of like, I'm miserable here, but I made it out. So if I don't make it, then what is that showing my younger siblings? So I kind of like
Gotcha.
suffered through a couple of years, man, because I graduated in 5, and the first 3.5 were just absolutely miserable. But kind of like a tale of two cities, that's where the education opportunity program came in. Because they provided two things. One was a comunidad that really provided like the navigational, the cultural, and the social capital and support necessary to like really transform my experience there and for me to make it my own. And I was an advisor to students who had similar backgrounds as I did. So I was able to be like, yo, this is how I messed up. I'm not telling you what to do, but here's a perspective for you to take into consideration when you're making your decisions, because you're an adult. So like me sharing my personal testimony with students and just through meeting with them and vibing and getting to know them as human beings and as students, they built like a more intersectional mindset that I ever did. So it got to the point where like my students had an understanding of the institution before they started, because we had like a summer program where they came in before their first year. So they knew everything that I knew by the time I graduated, pretty much, before they even started. So instead of like the university defining their experience, they were already trying to figure out how to define their experience at the university.
Right.
And that was really to set the framework for like me just continuing to work in the space for like student populations that are often marginalized in higher ed.
Yeah, man. And again, as I listen to you, I just hear legacy came to my mind, right? That was the word that came to my mind. Like through your laying of the tracks, so to speak, through your struggles, you was able to create a legacy because, as you mentioned earlier, like you're not just doing something that a new employee book is telling you to do. Like you're giving them information off of lived experiences, man. So they couldn't help but to feel what you were laying down. You know what I'm saying? So I'm starting to see the picture of like how this is all coming together, right? And trust me, I understand the unemployment after graduation. 2 times it happened, you know what I'm saying? Undergrad and grad school for me. But tell me about where did you go to grad school, bro?
So I was fortunate enough, and never in a million years would I ever thought I'd get in, but I ended up going to the Harvard Graduate School of Education and got my master's degree in higher ed. I was very blessed that, and I also earned it, man. Like I put in the work. I think oftentimes I shy away from the praise because it's not the way I'm wired. But man, I was going to this boba spot every single day, pretty much for 6 months, working on my statements, working on my CV, doing edits, doing feedback, going back and forth with people, talking to students, talking to professors. Like I knew what I wanted, and I was a man on a mission. I was able to put in the work. So I had options, and Harvard I didn't think was going to be one of them. And once it came to that, man, it was really hard to say no.
But you shot that shot, man, and I appreciate you. I know you humble dude, but what you just did was talk about process, man, and that's what I'm big on right now. Is just telling people, yeah, we shoot our shots, but there's a process in that, right? And if I give everything I have, or I'm honest to the process, I let the chips fall where they're made, man. So I appreciate that. Appreciate that. So here, yet another change, going from the west to the east. But this time sounds like you have different tools, better prepared. Was there anything that jumped out to you, or were you just on that mission and you was just like, send them in, I'm gonna knock them out. I ain't scared of nothing.
And I'll tell you what, I think you mentioned legacy, and that to me was like me going to Harvard. It was like honoring my folks. You know what I'm saying? My parents are like, they don't have a formal education. They're immigrants from Jalisco, Mexico. But they're one of the smartest people I've ever known in my life, right? And that always to me was like, damn, they came to this country and sacrificed everything and continue to sacrifice everything for me and my siblings for us to get a shot at education. And Harvard was one of the few schools that they knew of in their small little town, right? So for one of their children to kind of go beyond the college dream, beyond a bachelor's, and write a chapter that wasn't supposed to be written at an institution that they actually recognize, who was like, speaking of legacy, that goes full circle. Like that goes beyond me, right? But now going to Harvard, man, it was two things. One, it was a battle between appreciating being there and recognizing I'm worthy of being there. And another where it was like, it was constantly just doing and very little processing, because Harvard's program was 9 months. It was just August, you graduated in May. So it was like drinking from accelerated to the max, man. And it was like drinking from a very privileged fire hose. So I was over here drinking water. I didn't know how it tasted like first time in my life, but it was just overwhelming, man. I kid you not. I think 1 week, Kyrie Irving was coming to speak. Malala was going to come to speak. The mayor of Puerto Rico, the president of Colombia, the people, the guest speakers who come to Harvard are just like ridiculous. The lineup is ridiculous, and the lineup is different every week and every month. So I remember teachers being like, "Oh yeah, if you have the opportunity to go to the Kennedy School, go to this school, sign up for this. And by the way, read this book by next week." And I'm like, "Bro, how do you expect us to do both?" Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't read and listen at the same time. But all that being said, man, it was a difficult transition for sure. I'm a California kid, born and raised, never seen snow in my life. I don't like snow. So living through a New England winter is a little different. You know what I'm saying? Winter coats are not the same in Cali than they are in the East Coast.
Word.
Your shoes are different. The style is different. Like at some point, man, I didn't give anything about style. I was like, I just want to be warm and not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, all that
Why
being
do people
said,
do this?
yeah, but all that being said, it was like it was a growth. It was a calculated risk for growth. Me putting myself in uncomfortable positions in very wealthy institutions that I don't feel wanted or welcomed, and really try to make it my own. And I think the first semester was really just, oh my God, I'm here. Oh my God, this is professor, like yada yada yada. And then halfway through, I was like, you know what? Like, yes, it's one thing to appreciate where you're at, but it's another thing to also ask the institution for what you need. And I feel like I was just okay with scraps because I was just appreciative to be there. And I'm like, nah. At some point, you also got to recognize what you bring to the space. So at that point, I recognized like, yo, I'm bringing capital to y'all. You know what I'm saying? A lot of Black and brown folk, students of color there, were bringing capital to them, and they would have been brilliant whether they went to Harvard or not. So it's like Harvard is making like money off of us rather than the other way around.
Speaking.
Yeah, man. So that's kind of my dual experience, was like just transitioning from appreciation to really demanding things that I needed. And just there's still things that I'm like, yo, that came up in that one class, or that came up in that one conversation with this one professor like 2 years later. So it's like they definitely planted a lot of seeds, but they just didn't. It's hard to like plant a seed and see it grow in 9 months. Like you gotta be patient and see it.
Word. That's I heard of accelerated nursing. I didn't hear no 9-month programs, man. But thanks for the inside tip on Harvard, y'all. All right, so y'all know if y'all planning on going to Harvard, get your speed reading up. You feel me?
For real. Or get like a group of people to read one chapter and you read another, and you share you something, man. Whatever works for y'all, you could. Yeah. That was a whole nother level.
Man. Well, as we keep building this thing, man, again, like you said holistic earlier, and I'm feeling like we providing the audience with that holistic view of your journey. So since we gonna leave Harvard, we gonna go a little bit towards DC, or a lot of it, we gonna go to DC in the present, man. And we'll talk about the Education Trust. Is there currently any important but under the radar issue that is being addressed by policy that you could speak about?
Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, I know everybody's focused on like student loan forgiveness, but that's just what's in the media. But if there's something else you can bring our attention to.
Yeah, and one thing I'll mention, and I'll mention a win, because oftentimes policy can last years. It's a very delayed gratification type of role where there's people who have been in the space for years advocating for something, and it's just so slow moving that it'll be years later until you see anything come to fruition. So something that recently got addressed is that Pell Grants are now eligible to currently incarcerated individuals. Where in the past, that wasn't something, like in the past it was, and then the crime bill in the 90s kind of twisted that. But people have been advocating that for years because, first of all, the criminal legal system disproportionately targets and impacts Black and Brown communities. Let's just say that off the top, right?
Facts.
So
Facts.
you have a bunch of brown and Black folk in these prisons, in juvenile detention systems, what have you, and 95% of them are going to be released back into society. But what people don't often think about is like, you're releasing them back into society, but with what? Once you get in contact with the legal system, it's like a tentacle, bro. It keeps pulling you back, or it prevents you from like accessing housing, credit, loans, like public supports. Like so many different things are impacted after you leave, like whatever carceral system you were in, and people don't often talk about that. It needs to continue.
Yeah.
So I mentioned Pell Grants, and again, Pell Grant is like a federal grant, which is money you don't pay back, that's available to currently incarcerated individuals, and that helps them pursue an education degree or certificate while they're locked up. And this is helpful because, like, there's multiple studies that prove, when students or when incarcerated individuals like get an education while in prison, like their rate of going back into prison decreases a lot.
Yes.
The prison within itself, like the guards have actually said, like, it actually improves the ambiance and the vibe within the system, right? So there's less breakouts, there's less violence within it. But again, it's often more of like they don't deserve it because of X, Y, Z.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that's something that I think is an important issue that got passed, that I think for me, who I'm in the policy space, and because like the work that I do is very racial justice and equity oriented, we have like a pulse on that. But for other folks who may not be like, they might not have to think about, or they might not have people who have been locked up. They don't necessarily think about what they do when they're in there. So that's a win. That should be being rolled out, which is great. And hopefully that's just the first step, because now you have all this influx of money. Now you got to make sure that the programs that are being offered to incarcerated individuals are of quality, not of quantity.
Right.
So it's like you don't want for-profits going in there. You don't want programs who don't show good job placement. Is going to get even more debt. Like now it's just like, okay, this is the first step, but there's a long way to go, man. A long way to go. But that's just an important issue that, again, is a win. It got passed, but there's still more work to do.
Yes. And actually, I can see what you're saying as far as you're giving people hope for when they're done, because they in there, they doing their time, but when they out, I know a lot of people don't want to go back. I know my cousins don't want to go back. You know what I mean? And so when you have some type of certification or degree, that just helps your prospects, whether you end up becoming an entrepreneur or you trying to go to the 9-to-5 world, and you have a very precious resource while you're locked up, which resource is time, right? So putting time to use. So no, that's dope, man. That's dope. Let me see here. Is it possible to walk us through the workflow at your agency? Is that too broad of a question, or is that?
Nah. I think my answer will be broad, and I say it because it does depend on the project.
Okay.
And I also think it depends across like the spectrum of organizations. So I'll give you an example of like, if we're working on a brief, which is like, maximum 10 pages long. It's a whole effort, bro. Like from concepts that you just brainstorming. All right, what are we going to talk about? How are we going to analyze this? What is previous work that we've done that's in the field already? So we're not just repeating things, we're inventing something new. And then from there, from the outline, we have like a communications team that's absolutely excellent and brilliant, where they provide their perspectives on like framing, like, what is like our organization framing for certain things. And they also provide just really great feedback on like, a counter argument is this. So what would you say? Like, don't forget about this. So they really polish it up. So it goes from outline, it goes through certain people, then it goes into like a draft or something. And that goes through the same process, through the same communications people, the same people on our team. And we just keep doing that until it gets to a time where it's polished. And then from there, it goes to like the CEO. He kind of writes off on it. And from there, once all of that is like kind of done and set, it goes through a design process. So it's not just writing things. It's like, okay, how do you make it look good? How do you make it digestible for many audiences, whether that's advocates, policymakers, students, parents? And again, that's conversations we have at the beginning. Like, who are we writing this for? And how are we doing it? We also think of different organizations that we partner with that might be experts in this. And like, hey, yo, like, are y'all willing to read this draft form of something? Like, what are your thoughts? From there, it goes into like making it look good. And we have a design team that's amazing as well. Once that starts getting finalized, it's another last read. Make sure our citations are correct. Make sure the links work. Make sure it flows well. And then from there, something I never knew was like an embargoed copy, which I had no idea what it was, but it's like you essentially stamp it saying this is a final version, but now we're going to kind of like reach out to different people in media, be like, hey, we're about to release this. Like, you get kind of like the first take at this. You know, if you want to write something on it, like, let me know. So then that is where like we get tied into like media engagements. So like, for example, for myself, like I've been able to interview with like Inside Higher Education for diverse issues in higher education, where like we're releasing something and they take of interest, so that we just hop on a call like now and be like, hey, we just want to talk to you about your report. You know, how would you synthesize it? What's the main takes? And you talk about your work, and it gets like amplified in just different ways and different mediums. And then from there, it really is like you can submit it to conferences, presentations, you can slice it into op-eds. And for me, it really just comes down to like, who are we trying to impact and what's the best way to do it? And for me personally, it's like students and policymakers. Like, how do we connect those two experiences to be able to like talk to each other and influence each other? But that's kind of a breakdown of like outline, multiple drafts, then design, and then figuring out the strategy to bring it out into the world. Because you can't just drop, like, for example, can you imagine dropping a brief on like inauguration day? Like, it's not going to be read. You know what I'm saying? If you drop a brief at certain times, like, it's just, there's other things within the world that are going on. So that's where the communication comes in, of like framing and timing of when to release it and how to release it. And I should also mention like tech, we have like a tech team as well, social media team. So they'll build a tab on the website, you know, they'll upload things, they'll send it out in newsletters, like all of that stuff that's like way beyond my skill set, but they are also very critical in making sure like the link works, because you can have a dope brief, but if the link doesn't work to it, no one can read it. So it's a whole team effort, man.
Yes. And again, like you started it off perfect with like talking about a holistic mindset or a holistic team, right? And just a couple of things that you mentioned. Y'all got the information, y'all got smart people on your team. Okay, now how do we communicate that information to these various channels, right? And that's so important, because being in a semi-educational space myself, the biggest thing I see is like not people's intelligence. They don't know where to look, or they're so busy with other issues of life, it doesn't occur to them, hey, let me dig through this website for 15 minutes. That's not top on their priority list, right? So if you can make something attractive and the wording is something that they can get right away, okay, now we creating a force. You know what I'm saying? Because people are informed, and now they can make an informed decision. So no, I really was able to picture again how the sausage is made, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? I can see the factory, man. I can see the factory. So with all this, how has working on such an awesome team you mentioned, like how has that influenced you or allowed you to stretch and grow in new ways?
Man, every way. Like, it really was a high challenge, high support type of environment. I'm very blessed to where like my coworkers I can also call them my friends. You know what I'm saying? So we can sit through like a huge feedback loop, go through this huge project, and then afterwards grab some drinks and just vibe and not talk about work, talk about family, talk about friends, talk about dancing, relationships, whatever the case may be. But their equity can be applied to so many things, but sometimes it's hard when you don't see an example. And I feel like I'm around so many people that live equity and apply that mindset to so many different things in so many different ways. I'm like, yo, I never thought of it that way. You know what I'm saying? Or like, even just like not just work wise, but just how people treat other people in the workspace. Like, I've never been in a position where like I have a cough and my boss is like, you know what, just take the rest of the day out. I'm like, what? What are you talking? Like, I'm used to like spaces where, like, all right, you know, like I have a cough, that's fine. Like, I keep working. You know what I'm saying? So I think it like it both stretched me in a way that like coming from a low income background, coming from a first gen background, like you always have to do twice as better to go equally as far. So it's almost like, look, we recognize you're brilliant. We recognize that's why we brought you on this team. Like, it's okay. You can relax a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So I was stressed in that way. But also I had no idea what policy is. I still am trying to figure out what exactly that entails. So from like reading bills to seeing like who to talk to for like which organizations do what, you know, who are the leading people, so to speak, in affordability and Pell Grants and incarcerated individuals, you know, and undocumented students and free college, you know, all of that I like literally learned by trial and error, and also through the people around me. Like, they were so open to all my questions, and I had a lot of them, man. Like, I'm one of those people that like I over prep, and I'd much rather over prep than under prep because I'd rather be caught like it wasn't enough than unprepared. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, my preparation is not going to be the issue. It might be that I don't know enough. It might be that like, you know, I was missing a perspective, but I'm gonna do everything that I can on my end to make sure that I'm prepared for whatever's going to be put in front of me. But nah, man, it's been a lot. And again, I thought because of the identities that I hold, I can't walk away from certain politics. You know what I'm saying? Politics follow me wherever I go. From English not being my first language to my income background to my race, whatever the case may be. So it's really dope to be in a space where people understand that. You know, I don't got to explain implicit bias. I don't got to explain racism. I don't got to explain white supremacy. People just understand it, and we can move forward from there. And that
Right.
also helps our work because that is our work. If we center racial justice and equity, Black Lives Matter isn't an like it's not a conversation, like it's a fact. And I think in other places they're still trying to grasp like, what does this mean? How does
Wrap
this
their head
connect?
around it. Yeah, and they're not having the perspectives. Um, so sometimes people are willing to listen, sometimes they're not. But for those who are, then you got to go to the explanation, and they may never have had anything that can help them truly understand. You know, they can try to listen, but I hear what you're saying, man. You in a tribe, bro. you you in a
Yeah,
tribe. You know.
and I think to follow up with them, man, I'm really grateful that in this position I've been able to coalesce like my personal experiences as a first generation low income bilingual student, like my professional experiences as a college advisor with that same population, and now like all these questions that I have. And this job really made me see it, connect the individual experiences to
Hmm.
the systemic levers that make it happen. Right. So like, for example, you don't see people like me get into Harvard. You know, that's just not like I never did.
Right.
But through our work, through our research, like we just have like a, a report that was released. It's called Segregation Forever, where it shows numbers wise, like how top 100 selective public institutions are doing in accepting Black and Brown students, and they're not doing very well. Right. So that's like connecting an individual experience, an individual observation that you see people like, nah, man, you're just like, you know, you're paranoid. You have just as much of a chance,
Yeah.
you know, that the pick yourself by your bootstraps. And
Oh
then
boy. Oh
you're
boy.
able to do work, you know, and then some of the work illuminates like, oh, systemically, this is what's going on. Um, so I feel like that's what this position has helped me grow in is like combining the individual to really the systemic.
Man. Man. Again, so much there. The one thing you mentioned, well, I have my little comment. Sorry, I should have let you speak. It's just I'm a big believer that everybody gets some type of help, and there's nothing wrong with getting help or mentoring, right? So that pull you up by your bootstraps thing really bothers me because somebody is helping all of us along the way, right? We no man is an island, as they say, and there's nothing wrong. Again, with we talked about legacy with someone reaching back and pointing out, hey, you can go that way, or you can try this way. Maybe a little bit less bumps for you, or giving you a heads up, so to speak. Just talking to you about an experience. So I'm sorry, bro, to interrupt you, but that one always gets under my skin, man.
Likewise,
Always.
likewise.
Yeah, 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 man. So, man, this has been. I don't even know if I'm doing a good job, man, because you like I could pull on so much, but I'm trying to. Wow, man, this just been great. Look, I can't even finish my sentences, but you had mentioned politics follow you wherever you go. It's just a part of you. And then we've talked about Cali, we talked about New England, DC. You were there for some of the things that went on this summer, COVID being one, Black Lives Matters protests. What is your recollection, or what can you share with us as like you said, your work and life was happening alongside of that, man? What was your experience?
That's a lot. And just being flat out like how to be an accomplice and support Black folks as a non-Black person is a question I'm always asking myself, right? And then when you see these things come to light, you know, literally state-sanctioned violence and murder, everything gets heightened. I think me personally, I'm beyond like the implicit bias, whether it's real or not. I'm beyond whether or not Black Lives Matter or not, because they do. I'm more of like, how do I, with the identities that I hold, being heterosexual, cisgendered, light-skinned Mexican, how do those identities give me privilege and disprivilege? And how do I perpetuate anti-Blackness within my communities, right? Because I view like racism the same, like, yeah, like there's no, to me, color blindness isn't the way to go. Like you recognize that race has impacts on people's outcomes because systemically it's embedded and coded within the systems, right? But even me, like I've come to terms with that. I am a palatable version of a person of color. When I'm around white people, they know I'm not white, but they don't know what I am. But what I am is digestible to them. You know what I'm saying?
Ooh.
So I can be that exotic friend to them because I can talk their talk, but at the same time, I can turn around and be like, yo, these, X, Y, Z. And I come to terms with that. Like all that to say is during those times, I was just trying to think of like, I work with pretty much a predominantly Black team. I have dope homies in my comunidad who identify as Black. So it's just me, like, how do I support them in not a tokenizing way? How do I go beyond the marches, beyond the book clubs, beyond like that one-time donation to a Black Lives Matter organization? Like, how do I go beyond that? Like, are you doing it to make yourself feel better? Or are you doing it because you're really down for liberation? I think those were the questions I was asking myself. Like, because these are things I'm constantly just personally, internally, just reflecting. Like, how do I perpetuate anti-Blackness? Like, how do I perpetuate like toxic masculinity? All these things, and I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I've gotten rid of them because of the identities and the privileges that I have. All I can do is be like recognize it better and do a better job. But at that point, man, it really was like just having conversations with other people within my friends that were not Black, right? And offering supports in whatever way that I could to my Black friends. And sometimes it was like, yo, how was your day? And we talk about it and share that space. Other times it was like, yo, here's the song that I heard. I know that's your love language. Like, here you go. Hopefully this provides something positive to your day.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, it was a constant duality of how do I, a quote unquote person of color, perpetuate anti-Blackness and how I can get better? And how can I support the Black folks within my life without it being tokenizing and without it being a burden to them? And those are two things that I think I will never figure out, but I can get better at doing.
Yeah, I hear you. And I appreciate the explanation of the tokenizing, right? I started to feel that way, like with the t-shirts and the hashtags, and it kind of became like a cool thing to do in my eyes, and that might just me being jaded or whatever, right? But sort of like this whole conversation, policy is a moving train, but a slow moving train. So like undoing generations of just we'll just call it wickedness. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be a moving but a slow moving train, right? So a t-shirt is a start, and there's no disrespect to that for the people who got on the momentum. But it's a 12 round fight, to be sure. You know what I'm saying? This ain't gonna be a Tyson. You know what I'm saying? You gotta watch more than two rounds. This is a 12 round fight. Because we being everybody that's down is really trying to upend a historic system that's been in place forever, right? So you have pushback against that, right? The old guard, so to speak. So, but since you have boots on the ground, man, I just wanted to get that perspective,
Yeah, and actually, when Sam came to visit me, we did go to like a couple of protests. Having that conversation within ourselves as a biracial couple, what that means. I think it just hits different when you're in the epicenter of it. I never had any dreams of moving to DC and being at the center of stuff. That was never in my cards. But I recognize when things are going on in the country, it's amplified in DC.
Gotcha.
So it's like all these different, like, it was just like you feel it and you hear it and you see it, and it's very different. It's like proximity changes things and how you process it. Like, it's different if you're out here, like, unless you're in California where you're in an area where the marches are happening every day. Like in DC, there was always, like, every day, even when the news stopped, there was something going on. Just because the news cycle stopped didn't mean the people did it. And that was something that I really took into mind of, like, yo, there's people who are on the ground doing this stuff all the time, but they never get any praise or worship of it. So, yeah, man, it was definitely a different experience going through something like that in DC.
Yeah. And yeah, our frontline leaders, right? They're organizing, boots on the ground, moving people, bringing awareness, and their thing isn't to get the media attention or whatever. They're trying to raise awareness for the wrong that they've seen, And we have, I don't want to compare the levels, but Oakland, even though much gentrification is going on there, Oakland still has that history of like, nah, we gonna highlight what's going on down here. So I can only imagine, like you said, the pulse that was felt in DC, man. Crazy. Well, man, let's get to some quick hits. Is there anything I didn't touch on that you feel you would like to bring some attention to?
Nah, man, and just shout out to you. Your questions were absolutely fire. Like, I was literally telling Sam, I was in a prep for this last night. Right, I usually try to prep for when I'm going to be recorded or whatever, so I don't sound wild. But your questions were so thoughtful and so curated, where they were broad enough for me to give space for me to provide my perspective and narrow enough for it to not go on a tangent. I was like, I don't got to prep for these. Like, Chris did his homework and did his job, and like both personal and professional, man. So just to shout out to you for the questions. Like, I legit say this on my Google Doc because I'm like, this is the template moving forward. If I have to interview anybody, like the way you set it up was brilliant, man. So just shout out to you for really taking the time and the effort and the space and just to curate these things, man. It was amazing.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Like you, I don't do well with praise, but I accept it. Because I just, like, when quarantine hit, man, I felt I had a dope network, man. So I'm just trying to tap and shine a light on people that I know that are doing great things, impactful things. And I know just from observing you, you kind of like, yo, I'm gonna put my head down, I'm gonna work this thing out, But I feel like just having a conversation and putting it out into the atmosphere, we might be, somebody that's in undergrad right now might be grabbing hold of this, like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. He's talking about me. That's my life. I come from place A. I'm smart enough to be in place B, but I'm feeling uncomfortable, right? So yeah, man, that's the heart of what I'm trying to do in various scenarios, depending on what my network can do. Just like peel back those layers, like, yo, let's just talk about it, right? So appreciate you. So with these quick hits, bro, what was your go-to song for 2020? And do you got any early recommendations for the 2-1?
Man, I'm a huge R&B guy. I think in high school I was like super hardcore rap, hip hop, and then as I got older, R&B just became the thing that soothes my thoughts. So according to Spotify, it was "A Seat" by Arin Ray. You know what I'm saying? I honestly don't remember listening to it that much, but I guess it was the most played song that I had. So there's that. But now for 2021, it actually is an older song. It's "Never Too Much" by Vandross. And the reason that came up is because I heard a sample through a DJ on Instagram called Amorphous, and that he really blends like older songs and newer songs together. So I heard that sample, and he actually created a song called "Sunshine" by Fat Joe, DJ Khaled, and Amorphous. Right, so they cleared the sample. Fat Joe laid some bars, and the beat was just dope. And it's like, but again, it was "Sunshine" in 2021, but the sample is "Never Too Much" by Vandross, and it's just a dope. Like you can't help but vibe to it. You just puts you in a good mood. So that's something I've been bumping for a good month. Sam's like, I think you listen to the same music all the time. It's a good song.
Let me vibe. I told y'all she a drill song, man. I told y'all, man. But all right, a book you haven't read yet but want to.
I just started reading it. It's Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. So it delves into like racial ethnic makeup and how that's embedded systemically. And thus far, man, I'm only like a chapter in, but they have beautiful comparisons. Like I'm a huge metaphor person, and their metaphors are like, it goes from like comparing a house to like racism, comparing a house to like the insurrection. Like it's just like mind blowing how they're able to connect these dots in two completely different things. But it's excellent storytelling, and I'm excited to delve into it.
Man, what was the title and the author one more time?
Caste by Isabel Wilkerson.
All right. You gonna mess around? So I asked for the music because I gotta look like a playlist for all the guests. You gonna mess around? I'm gonna have a book recommendation list, man. All right. Favorite food in Cali and DC. I know they known for the mumbo sauce, but everybody don't like the mumbo sauce out there. So go ahead.
Well, in Cali, for sure, Mexican food, man, because on the East Coast, geographically, there's not a lot of Mexicans there, and therefore, the quality, in my opinion, is a little down. Everybody has their opinions. Personally, not to be a snobby Californian, but the food's just different, right? And in DC, man, DC has so much food. I think one of the best foods that I had was actually Ethiopian food. They have like a whole little Ethiopian little section in DC, like. Amazing, man. First, one of my homegirls, she took me. I've never had it before, and it was amazing. And it was like light enough to not feel like I need to go take a nap after. But full enough where like I'm satisfied, And there was a whole bunch of stuff I've never eaten before. So the Ethiopian food in DC for sure was amazing.
Awesome. 3 destinations in Cali for people not from Cali.
I'm biased, right? So go up to Delaware County, Smith River. If you like cannabis, it's cheap, But beyond that, just the views. If you like the ocean, you got a whole coast, and you can have miles to the left or right of you by yourself. If you like the forest, you can get lost in the redwoods. You like river rafting, you go river rafting. Like camping, there's campsites all up and down the river. And I also shout out to Southern Oregon as well, because I'm so close to Oregon where like the coast is all in one, right?
Yes,
so there's some beautiful scenery in Southern Oregon on the 101 that are actually state parks that it's like protected. And there's a bunch of spots where you can literally see redwoods on the cliff right under there's the ocean, right? So it's just like this beautiful merging of two different like just majestic worlds together. I think it's beautiful. Another one I'll probably say is complete opposite end is San Diego, because I'm a beach person. I love the beach. You know, the weather's a little warmer, and the
Yes.
food, especially the Mexican food in San Diego. Like Sam and I went for spring break like 2 years ago, and literally around the corner from Airbnb was just a random pop-up taco shop. And it was absolutely phenomenal. You know what I'm saying? There's no sign. It was just a tarp. The lady look at my aunt making the tacos.
That's the
Amazing.
best kind. That's the best kind, man.
And lastly is San Francisco personally. And that's more for the dancing. So I'm a bachata dancer. I think San Francisco had some amazing dancing pre-pandemic. And also SF just kind of has a little bit of everything in regards to like different boroughs you can go to. You know, different like Chinatown, there's a lot of history as well. So yeah, SF.
All right. Last but not least, any burrito spot recommendations, man? Taco burrito spot recommendations.
Yeah, the one that actually comes to mind is a breakfast burrito in Davis. So I'm gonna stay local.
What?
I'm gonna stay
What?
local, man. I'm gonna switch it up. I'm not gonna go Mexican. It's the breakfast burrito at Alibaba's. Anybody who went to UC Davis knows what Alibaba's is, and if you didn't, y'all need to come back and have it. Like it's different than most breakfast burritos, right? Because most people have a very certain image of what it's supposed to contain, but it really is a blend of like Mexican and Mediterranean food into one breakfast burrito. You know what I'm saying? So it's delicious. I was just telling Sam today, I was like, yo, I'm craving an Alibaba burrito right now. So I'll say Alibaba's in Davis.
That's how you know it's real. That's how you know it's real. All right, bro. Before we get out of here, man, is there any like LinkedIn information, any contact information you want to lay down for the people?
Yeah, I mean, y'all can honestly LinkedIn for sure. Probably, I check it pretty periodically. So just my full name, Jaime Ramirez Mendoza. If y'all feel like connecting, feel free to connect there. Message me, like chat. You know, I am, and I tell this to my brothers all the time. Like, take away the scholarships, take away the degrees. The most valuable thing that I have in my life is my comunidad. It's not even close, right? So I'm always looking to build, and I think there's a difference between networking and connecting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm down to do both, but I'm just a connector because that's just the way I was raised. So if y'all, if any of this was like yes, if y'all want to have some perspective, challenge me on some stuff, I'm open to that too. We can you know help ourselves get better. But yeah, just my full name on LinkedIn, I think would be a great way if folks want to connect.
Iron sharper than iron. And one more time, I think my bootleg overseas internet went out. What was say it again?
Yeah, so my full name on LinkedIn, which is Jaime Ramirez Mendoza. And I think that the title should say like policy analyst at the Education Trust.
Awesome, awesome. Yo, man, jam packed episode. I can't believe we got it in this amount of time because it was literally a lot more I could have pulled on, man. But awesome guest. Thank you, bro. Go ahead and get that burrito with Sam. And we'll have to do an update or something. This is dope, man. I appreciate your time, bro.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me on, bro. Hopefully you have a good rest of your day.